Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some current physician assessment methods used by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins may not consistently reflect a physician's true capabilities or may not accurately measure the intended competencies. Considering the CNOM regulatory framework and ethical obligations, which of the following approaches best addresses these concerns regarding the reliability and validity of assessments? Option A. Focusing on assessment methods that are perceived as challenging and demanding, believing that difficulty inherently equates to a higher standard of evaluation. Option B. Implementing a rigorous review process for all assessment tools to evaluate their psychometric properties, including measures of consistency, reliability, and accuracy in measuring intended outcomes validity, and making adjustments based on this evidence. Option C. Prioritizing assessment methods that are widely recognized and frequently used in other medical jurisdictions, assuming their reliability and validity are transferable without specific local validation. Option D. Relying on the subjective opinions of a small, select group of senior physicians to determine the overall effectiveness of assessment tools without formal validation studies. The correct answer is B. Implementing a rigorous review process for all assessment tools to evaluate their psychometric properties, including measures of consistency, reliability, and accuracy in measuring intended outcomes validity, and making adjustments based on this evidence. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, in ensuring the reliability and validity of assessments used for physician evaluation and professional development. The CNOM, as the regulatory body, has a mandate to uphold the quality of medical practice and protect public health. When stakeholder feedback highlights concerns about assessment methods, it directly impacts the CNOM ability to fulfill this mandate. The challenge lies in balancing the need for rigorous evaluation with the practicalities of assessment design and implementation, all while adhering strictly to the CNOM ethical codes and regulatory framework. Careful judgment is required to identify assessment approaches that are not only fair and accurate, but also align with the principles of professional integrity and continuous improvement, as defined by French medical regulations. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and evidence-based evaluation of assessment tools, focusing on their psychometric properties, reliability, and validity, within the specific context of medical practice as governed by the CNOM. This aligns with the CNOM responsibility to ensure that evaluations are meaningful and contribute to the competence and ethical conduct of physicians. By prioritizing methods that demonstrate consistent results, reliability, and accurately measure what they intend to measure, validity, the CNOM upholds its commitment to professional standards and patient safety. This approach is ethically sound as it ensures that decisions based on assessments are fair and justifiable, preventing arbitrary or flawed evaluations that could negatively impact a physician's career or patient care. Regulatory adherence is paramount, and any assessment framework must be demonstrably aligned with the CNOM guidelines on professional evaluation and continuing medical education. An incorrect approach that relies solely on anecdotal evidence or superficial agreement among a limited group of stakeholders fails to meet the CNOM standards for objective evaluation. This approach is ethically flawed because it risks making decisions based on subjective impressions rather than robust data, potentially leading to unfair judgments about a physician's competence. It also fails to meet regulatory requirements for evidence-based decision-making within the CNOM framework. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes ease of implementation over rigorous validation overlooks the fundamental purpose of assessment to accurately gauge competence. This is a regulatory failure, as it deviates from the CNOM duty to ensure that all professional evaluations are meaningful and contribute to the advancement of medical knowledge and practice. Ethically, it is unacceptable to use assessments that are not proven to be reliable and valid, as this can lead to misidentification of areas for improvement or, conversely, a false sense of security regarding a physician's skills. A third incorrect approach that focuses on the perceived difficulty of an assessment rather than its accuracy is also problematic. Difficulty is not a direct measure of reliability or validity. An assessment can be difficult but still unreliable or invalid, or it can be moderately difficult and highly reliable and valid. This approach represents a misunderstanding of assessment principles and a potential regulatory oversight in ensuring the quality of evaluations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledging and investigating stakeholder feedback to understand the specific concerns. Second, consulting the CNOM regulatory framework and ethical guidelines to identify the principles governing physician assessment. Third, evaluating proposed or existing assessment methods against established criteria for reliability and validity, seeking expert advice if necessary. Fourth, prioritizing approaches that are demonstrably robust, fair, and aligned with the CNOM objectives for professional development and patient care. Finally, ensuring transparency in the assessment process and providing clear rationale for the chosen methods. Question 2. Implementation of psychometric principles in patient assessment by a physician practicing under the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, requires careful consideration of ethical and regulatory frameworks. A physician is considering using a newly developed, yet to be widely validated, questionnaire to assess a patient's subjective experience of pain, believing it might offer a more nuanced understanding than standard scales. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the CNOM regulatory framework and ethical guidelines? Option A. The physician prioritizes the use of the new questionnaire over established clinical interview techniques to gather more detailed subjective data. Option B. The physician decides to use the questionnaire without informing the patient, assuming that any tool used in good faith for assessment is permissible. Option C. The physician proceeds with using the questionnaire, explaining its experimental nature to the patient and obtaining informed consent, while emphasizing that the results will be used as one piece of information alongside their clinical judgment. Option D. The physician adopts the questionnaire as the primary diagnostic tool for pain assessment, relying heavily on its scores to guide treatment decisions without further clinical corroboration. The correct answer is C. The physician proceeds with using the questionnaire, explaining its experimental nature to the patient and obtaining informed consent, while emphasizing that the results will be used as one piece of information alongside their clinical judgment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a physician in the context of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, regarding the ethical and regulatory implications of using psychometric principles in patient care. The core difficulty lies in balancing the potential benefits of objective assessment with the physician's duty of care, patient confidentiality, and the specific ethical guidelines set forth by the CNOM. Physicians must ensure that any psychometric tools used are validated, appropriate for the clinical context, and do not lead to discriminatory or biased outcomes, all while respecting the patient's autonomy and the integrity of the doctor-patient relationship. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a physician carefully selecting and utilizing validated psychometric instruments that are recognized within the medical community and are appropriate for the specific clinical question being addressed. This approach aligns with the CNOM emphasis on professional competence, evidence-based practice, and the ethical imperative to act in the best interest of the patient. The physician must also ensure that the interpretation and application of the results are done with clinical expertise, considering the individual patient's context, and that appropriate consent is obtained, respecting patient confidentiality as mandated by the Code de Déontologie Médicale. The use of such tools should enhance, not replace, clinical judgment. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves the physician relying solely on a psychometric tool without integrating its results with their clinical judgment and the patient's overall presentation. This failure constitutes a breach of professional responsibility by potentially overemphasizing a single data point and neglecting the holistic assessment required by the CNOM. It can lead to misdiagnosis or inappropriate treatment plans, violating the physician's duty of care. Another incorrect approach is the use of unvalidated or experimental psychometric tools without proper justification or patient consent. This action directly contravenes the CNOM principles of professional competence and ethical practice. Using unvalidated tools risks generating unreliable data, which can mislead clinical decision-making and potentially harm the patient. Furthermore, failing to obtain informed consent for the use of such tools violates patient autonomy and confidentiality principles. A third incorrect approach is the indiscriminate application of psychometric testing to all patients presenting with a particular symptom, without considering individual patient factors or the specific clinical relevance of the test. This can lead to unnecessary testing, patient distress, and a misallocation of resources, which is contrary to the CNOM guidance on responsible medical practice and the efficient use of healthcare resources. It also risks pathologizing normal variations in human experience. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situation should adopt a systematic decision-making process. First, they must clearly define the clinical question that a psychometric tool might help answer. Second, they should research and identify validated, reliable, and ethically sound psychometric instruments relevant to that question and the patient population. Third, they must obtain informed consent from the patient, explaining the purpose, nature, potential benefits, and limitations of the assessment. Fourth, the physician must interpret the results within the broader clinical context, integrating them with other diagnostic information and their own professional judgment. Finally, they must ensure that the findings are communicated to the patient in an understandable manner, and that the subsequent clinical decisions are ethically sound and in the patient's best interest, always adhering to the CNOM Code de Deontologie Médicale. Question 3. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for perceived conflict of interest when a physician's close family member, who is also a physician, expresses a strong desire to be actively involved in the patient's medical care and decision-making process. The primary physician is concerned about maintaining professional objectivity and ensuring the patient's autonomy is fully respected. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the primary physician to take in this situation, adhering strictly to the principles and regulations of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins? Option A. Initiate a clear and open discussion with the patient and the family member to define the scope of the family member's involvement, ensuring the patient provides explicit informed consent for any participation, and maintaining the primary physician's ultimate responsibility for medical judgment and decision-making. Option B. Defer to the family member's medical expertise and opinions, allowing them to significantly influence or direct the patient's treatment plan, given their shared profession. Option C. Proceed with the family member's involvement as requested, assuming their medical background will naturally lead to beneficial contributions without needing explicit clarification or consent beyond the initial request. Option D. Politely decline any involvement from the family member, citing potential conflicts, and proceed with care as if the family member were any other concerned relative, without further discussion. The correct answer is A. Initiate a clear and open discussion with the patient and the family member to define the scope of the family member's involvement, ensuring the patient provides explicit informed consent for any participation, and maintaining the primary physician's ultimate responsibility for medical judgment and decision-making. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a physician's duty to their patient and the potential for a perceived conflict of interest or undue influence when a patient's family member is also a physician involved in the patient's care. The Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, regulations emphasize patient well-being, professional integrity, and the avoidance of situations that could compromise objective medical judgment. The correct approach, which involves clearly delineating roles, ensuring informed consent regarding the family member's involvement, and maintaining open communication with the patient and all involved parties, represents best professional practice. This aligns with CNOM emphasis on transparency and patient autonomy. By proactively addressing the potential for perceived bias or conflict, the physician upholds the trust placed in them and ensures the patient's best interests remain paramount, free from any external pressures or misunderstandings. This approach respects the patient's right to choose their caregivers and be fully informed about their treatment plan. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding without explicit discussion or clarification with the patient and the family member risks several regulatory and ethical failures. Firstly, it violates the principle of informed consent, as the patient may not fully understand the implications of having a family member involved in their medical decision-making, especially if that family member is also a physician. Secondly, it can lead to a breach of professional independence and objectivity, as the physician might feel implicitly pressured by the family member's presence or opinions, potentially compromising the quality of care. This could be seen as a failure to uphold the dignity and autonomy of the patient, as well as a potential violation of the physician's duty to act solely in the patient's best interest, free from undue influence. Another incorrect approach, such as deferring entirely to the family member's medical opinion without independent critical assessment, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This abrogates the physician's primary responsibility to the patient and can lead to substandard care if the family member's opinion is not based on the most current evidence or is influenced by personal biases. It also undermines the patient's right to receive care from a physician who is solely dedicated to their well-being. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the potential conflict or ethical concern. Recognize the dual role of the family member as both patient's relative and a physician. 2. Prioritize patient autonomy and well-being. Ensure all decisions are centered on the patient's best interests and their right to make informed choices. 3. Communicate openly and transparently. Initiate a discussion with the patient and the family member to clarify roles, expectations, and potential concerns. 4. Document all discussions and decisions. Maintain a clear record of conversations, agreements, and the rationale behind treatment plans. 5. Seek guidance if necessary. Consult with colleagues or the CNOM if the situation remains complex or unresolved. Question 4. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a data breach during the implementation of a new computer-based assessment system for the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins (CNOM). Considering the CNOM mandate to uphold professional standards and protect patient data, which of the following approaches to implementing this new system best aligns with regulatory and ethical requirements? Option A. Opt for a hybrid approach, using the new computer-based system for theoretical components while reverting to paper-based assessments for practical evaluations, without a thorough assessment of the digital system's data security. Option B. Implement the new system with a phased rollout, beginning with pilot testing in a controlled environment, followed by comprehensive security audits and mandatory training for all personnel involved in data handling and examination administration. Option C. Utilize the new computer-based assessment system for all examinations, but postpone any specific data security training for staff until after the initial implementation phase. Option D. Proceed with immediate full deployment of the new system across all assessment centers, relying on the vendor's standard security features without further independent verification. The correct answer is B. Implement the new system with a phased rollout, beginning with pilot testing in a controlled environment, followed by comprehensive security audits and mandatory training for all personnel involved in data handling and examination administration. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a data breach during the implementation of a new computer-based assessment system for the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins (CNOM). This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient and modern assessment methods with the paramount duty to protect sensitive patient data and maintain the integrity of medical licensing. The CNOM, as the governing body, has a strict ethical and legal obligation to ensure that any assessment process, especially one involving digital platforms, adheres to the highest standards of data security and patient confidentiality as mandated by French law and the CNOM own ethical code. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, secure, and auditable implementation of the computer-based assessment system. This involves rigorous testing of security protocols, comprehensive training for administrators and examiners on data protection, and the establishment of clear protocols for data handling and incident response. Such an approach directly aligns with the CNOM responsibility to uphold professional standards, protect patient information, and ensure the reliability of its examinations, thereby safeguarding public trust in the medical profession. An incorrect approach that involves immediate full deployment without adequate security vetting would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate data protection laws, e.g., GDPR as applied in France, and the CNOM ethical obligations regarding confidentiality and professional conduct. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on vendor assurances without independent verification of security measures, would demonstrate a lack of due diligence, exposing the CNOM and its members to undue risk and potentially compromising the integrity of the assessment process. Furthermore, neglecting to train personnel on the secure use of the new system would create vulnerabilities that could be exploited, leading to data breaches and a loss of confidence in the CNOM ability to manage sensitive information. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, considering potential threats to data security and assessment integrity. This should be followed by the selection of assessment methods that demonstrably meet security and ethical requirements, with a clear plan for implementation, training, and ongoing monitoring. Transparency with stakeholders regarding the chosen assessment methods and their security features is also crucial. Question 5. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of data breaches and a high impact on patient trust if new computer-based assessment tools are implemented without proper safeguards. Considering the historical evolution of computer-based assessment in medicine, which approach best aligns with the principles and regulations of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins for integrating these tools into practice. Option A. Conduct a thorough pilot study of selected computer-based assessment tools in a controlled environment, ensuring robust data encryption, secure access protocols, and comprehensive training for all involved physicians on both the technical operation and ethical implications of the technology. Option B. Implement the most advanced computer-based assessment tools immediately, focusing on their potential to reduce administrative burden and improve efficiency, with minimal initial investment in specialized security training. Option C. Prioritize cost savings by adopting the cheapest available computer-based assessment solutions, even if they offer limited data security features, as the primary goal is to modernize assessment methods. Option D. Rely solely on vendor-provided security assurances for computer-based assessment tools, assuming their systems are inherently secure and require no further internal validation or physician training beyond basic usage. The correct answer is B. Implement the most advanced computer-based assessment tools immediately, focusing on their potential to reduce administrative burden and improve efficiency, with minimal initial investment in specialized security training. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical and regulatory obligations of physicians within the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins framework when adopting new technologies for assessment. The core difficulty lies in balancing the potential benefits of computer-based assessment, CBA, with the imperative to uphold patient confidentiality, data security, and the physician's ultimate responsibility for patient care, all within the strictures of French medical law and the Ordre's guidelines. The historical development of CBA highlights a progression from simple digital record-keeping to sophisticated diagnostic and evaluative tools, each stage introducing new considerations for professional practice. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach, which prioritizes a phased implementation with robust data security protocols and ongoing professional training, aligns with the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins' emphasis on responsible innovation and the protection of patient rights. The Ordre's regulations, while not always explicitly detailing every technological advancement, implicitly mandate that physicians act with prudence, diligence, and in the best interest of their patients. This includes ensuring that any new assessment method, whether computer-based or not, meets rigorous standards of accuracy, reliability, and, crucially, data privacy. A phased approach allows for controlled testing, identification of potential vulnerabilities, and adaptation of protocols before widespread adoption, thereby minimizing risks to patient data and the integrity of the assessment process. Continuous training ensures that physicians remain competent in using these tools and understanding their limitations, a fundamental ethical duty. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediate and uncritical adoption of the most advanced CBA tools without adequate security measures or training. This directly contravenes the physician's duty of care and the regulatory expectation of due diligence. The Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins expects physicians to be masters of their tools and to ensure the security of patient information, as stipulated by laws concerning medical data protection e.g. RGPD as applied to healthcare. Failure to implement robust security protocols exposes patient data to breaches, a severe ethical and legal violation. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the cost-effectiveness of CBA without considering its impact on the physician-patient relationship or the validity of the assessment, also fails to meet professional standards. While efficiency is desirable, it cannot supersede the physician's responsibility to provide accurate and ethically sound assessments. The historical development of CBA shows a gradual integration, not a wholesale replacement of human judgment, and the Ordre emphasizes the physician's ultimate responsibility. Over-reliance on technology without critical oversight can lead to misdiagnosis or inappropriate treatment, violating the core principles of medical practice. A third incorrect approach, neglecting to seek guidance or validation from professional bodies or peers regarding the implementation of new CBA, demonstrates a lack of professional collegiality and adherence to best practices. The Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins encourages the sharing of knowledge and the establishment of professional standards. Ignoring this aspect can lead to the adoption of flawed or insecure systems, potentially harming patients and undermining the credibility of the profession. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the implementation of new technologies like CBA by first understanding the underlying principles and potential benefits, then rigorously evaluating their security, reliability, and ethical implications. This involves consulting relevant professional guidelines, seeking expert advice, and adopting a cautious, phased implementation strategy. A critical self-assessment of one's own competencies and the need for ongoing training is also paramount. The decision-making process should always prioritize patient well-being, data security, and adherence to the ethical and legal framework established by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins. Question 6. Investigation of a newly developed medical device designed to assist general practitioners in early detection of a specific neurological condition is underway by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM. The device's developers claim it accurately identifies individuals at high risk. The CNOM is reviewing the validation study submitted, which type of validity, if demonstrated with strong empirical evidence, would be most crucial for the CNOM to approve the device for widespread clinical use by physicians, given its intended purpose of predicting future patient outcomes. Option A, face validity. Option B, content validity. Option C, criterion-related validity, specifically predictive validity. Option D, construct validity. The correct answer is C, criterion-related validity, specifically predictive validity. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, in evaluating the validity of a new diagnostic tool intended for widespread use by physicians. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the tool accurately measures what it purports to measure, thereby safeguarding patient well-being and maintaining professional standards. The CNOM must consider the different facets of validity to determine if the tool is reliable and appropriate for clinical application. The correct approach focuses on establishing criterion-related validity, specifically predictive validity. This is paramount because the tool's primary purpose is to predict a future clinical outcome or diagnosis. Demonstrating that the tool's results correlate strongly with established, reliable diagnostic methods, patient prognosis, provides the most direct evidence of its practical utility and clinical relevance. This aligns with the CNOM mandate to ensure that medical practices are evidence-based and contribute positively to patient care, as stipulated by French medical ethics and regulations governing the practice of medicine. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on content validity. While content validity ensures that the tool's components adequately represent the domain it aims to measure, it does not guarantee that the tool will accurately predict clinical outcomes in real-world settings. This could lead to the adoption of a tool that appears comprehensive on paper, but fails in practical application, potentially misdiagnosing patients or leading to inappropriate treatment decisions, which would be a failure to uphold the CNOM duty of care. Another incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on construct validity, without sufficient empirical evidence. Construct validity assesses whether the tool measures an underlying theoretical concept. While important for understanding the tool's theoretical underpinnings, it is insufficient on its own for clinical adoption. Without demonstrating that this theoretical construct translates into meaningful clinical predictions or correlations with established criteria, the tool remains an academic exercise rather than a reliable clinical instrument. This would fall short of the rigorous validation required by the CNOM for tools impacting patient care. The professional decision-making process in such a situation requires a multifaceted evaluation. Physicians and regulatory bodies must first understand the intended purpose of the tool. Then, they should critically assess the evidence presented for each type of validity. For a clinical diagnostic tool, criterion-related validity, particularly predictive validity, should be the primary focus, supported by robust content and construct validity. This systematic approach ensures that the tool is not only theoretically sound, but also practically effective and safe for patient use, adhering to the ethical principles and regulatory requirements overseen by the CNOM. Question 7. What factors determine whether a physician's personal characteristics are relevant to their professional standing and obligations under the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, regulations? Option A. Subjective impressions and stereotypes unrelated to professional competence or ethical conduct. Option B. Characteristics that directly impact the physician's integrity, probity, and commitment to patient welfare and professional ethics. Option C. Social media activity that is purely personal and does not involve professional commentary. Option D. Personal lifestyle choices and private beliefs that do not interfere with professional duties or patient care. Correct answer is B. Characteristics that directly impact the physician's integrity, probity, and commitment to patient welfare and professional ethics. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Determining the personal characteristics relevant to a physician's professional conduct, particularly in the context of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, presents a significant challenge. It requires balancing the need to uphold professional standards and public trust with respecting individual autonomy and avoiding discriminatory practices. The CNOM framework aims to ensure that a physician's personal attributes do not negatively impact their ability to practice medicine ethically and competently, nor compromise the integrity of the profession. This involves a nuanced assessment that goes beyond mere superficial traits. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes characteristics that directly influence a physician's professional responsibilities and their adherence to the ethical and legal obligations mandated by the CNOM. This includes integrity, probity, and a commitment to patient well-being, as these are foundational to the physician-patient relationship and the public's trust in the medical profession. Such characteristics are not arbitrary, but are directly linked to the core duties of a physician as defined by the CNOM regulations, which prioritize patient safety, professional ethics, and the reputation of the medical order. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to consider characteristics that are purely personal and have no demonstrable impact on a physician's professional capacity or ethical conduct. For instance, personal lifestyle choices that do not interfere with professional duties or patient care, or personal beliefs unrelated to medical practice, are not within the CNOM legitimate purview for assessing professional suitability. Focusing on such aspects would constitute an overreach of regulatory authority and an infringement on personal liberties, lacking any basis in the CNOM mandate to regulate professional practice. Another incorrect approach would be to base the assessment on subjective biases or stereotypes rather than objective criteria related to professional competence and ethical behavior. This could involve making assumptions about a physician's capabilities or judgment based on their background, appearance, or non-professional affiliations. Such an approach is fundamentally at odds with the CNOM commitment to fairness and impartiality, and it risks leading to discriminatory outcomes that are both unethical and contrary to the principles of professional regulation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the assessment of personal characteristics by first identifying the specific regulatory framework governing their profession. In this case, the CNOM statutes and ethical codes. It must then critically evaluate how any given characteristic might directly and demonstrably affect the physician's ability to fulfill their professional duties, uphold ethical standards, and maintain public trust. The focus should always be on objective, evidence-based considerations directly linked to professional practice, rather than subjective opinions or irrelevant personal attributes. This requires a rigorous, principled, and non-discriminatory evaluation process. Question 8. When evaluating computer-based assessment platforms for medical professionals, which data collection method best aligns with the principles of transparency, data integrity, and adherence to the regulatory framework of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins? Option A. Utilizing proprietary algorithms that automatically collect and process all available digital interactions during the assessment, without explicit disclosure of the specific data points being captured. Option B. Employing a system that utilizes anonymized data aggregation with a clear audit trail for all data points collected, allowing for independent verification of the collection process and its adherence to privacy standards. Option C. Relying on data collection methods that prioritize speed and ease of implementation, even if they involve less robust security protocols or limited transparency in data handling. Option D. Implementing data collection that captures a broad spectrum of user activity, including keystroke logging and screen recording, without specific justification for the necessity of each data element for the assessment's validity. The correct answer is B. Employing a system that utilizes anonymized data aggregation with a clear audit trail for all data points collected, allowing for independent verification of the collection process and its adherence to privacy standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, when assessing the efficacy of computer-based assessments for medical professionals. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the data collection methods used within these assessments are both robust and ethically sound, adhering strictly to the CNOM regulatory framework. This requires a nuanced understanding of how digital data can be gathered, processed, and interpreted without compromising patient confidentiality, data integrity, or the fairness of the assessment process itself. The CNOM mandate emphasizes the protection of public health and the integrity of the medical profession, making any data collection method subject to rigorous scrutiny. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive evaluation of data collection methods that prioritizes transparency, accuracy, and adherence to data protection principles as outlined by French law and CNOM guidelines. This means scrutinizing how data points are identified, captured, and stored, ensuring that only relevant information is collected for the specific purpose of the assessment. It also necessitates verifying that the methods employed are secure, preventing unauthorized access or breaches, and that the data collected can be independently audited for validity. Such an approach aligns with the CNOM commitment to maintaining high professional standards and safeguarding the trust placed in physicians by the public. It reflects a proactive stance in ensuring that technological advancements in assessment do not inadvertently create ethical or regulatory vulnerabilities. Incorrect approaches analysis. An incorrect approach would be to accept data collection methods that rely on opaque algorithms or proprietary systems without independent verification of their data handling practices. This poses a significant regulatory risk, as it could lead to the collection of sensitive patient information without explicit consent or in violation of data privacy laws. Furthermore, it undermines the CNOM oversight capabilities, making it impossible to ensure the fairness and accuracy of the assessment results. Another flawed approach would be to prioritize speed or cost efficiency in data collection over data security and integrity. This could result in the use of less secure methods, increasing the risk of data breaches and compromising the reliability of the assessment outcomes, which directly contravenes the CNOM duty to uphold professional standards and protect patient data. Finally, adopting methods that do not allow for clear traceability of data collection processes would be problematic, as it hinders accountability and the ability to investigate any potential irregularities or biases within the assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with evaluating computer-based assessments under the CNOM framework must adopt a systematic and principle-based approach. This involves 1. Identifying the specific data points being collected and their relevance to the assessment objectives. 2. Verifying the security measures in place to protect collected data, ensuring compliance with relevant French data protection legislation, e.g., GDPR as implemented in France. 3. Assessing the transparency and auditability of the data collection methods, ensuring that the process is understandable and verifiable. 4. Confirming that the methods respect patient confidentiality and physician privacy, as mandated by ethical codes and CNOM regulations. 5. Evaluating the potential for bias or error inherent in the chosen data collection technology. This structured decision-making process ensures that technological tools are utilized in a manner that is consistent with the CNOM ethical and regulatory obligations, ultimately safeguarding the integrity of the medical profession and public trust. Question 9. The monitoring system demonstrates that a physician has been consistently collecting surplus biological samples from patients undergoing routine diagnostic procedures, with the intention of later seeking consent for their use in potential future research projects. Option A. The physician should inform patients that their surplus samples are being collected for potential research, and that they can opt out if they do not wish for their samples to be used. Option B. The physician may continue collecting surplus samples, as the intention is for future research and consent will be sought retrospectively. Option C. The physician should immediately cease collecting surplus samples for future research and implement a protocol for obtaining explicit, informed consent prior to any sample collection intended for research. Option D. The physician may proceed with using the collected surplus samples for research if the research is deemed to be of significant public health benefit, even without prior explicit consent. The correct answer is C. The physician should immediately cease collecting surplus samples for future research and implement a protocol for obtaining explicit, informed consent prior to any sample collection intended for research. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a physician to balance the ethical imperative of patient confidentiality and informed consent with the potential benefits of contributing to medical knowledge through sampling. The physician must navigate the delicate line between respecting individual autonomy and advancing public health through research, all within the strict ethical and regulatory framework of the Conseil national de l'Ordre des Médecins. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any sampling practice is not only scientifically sound, but also ethically unimpeachable, avoiding any form of exploitation or coercion. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes explicit, informed consent from the patient before any biological samples are collected for research purposes. This aligns directly with the fundamental ethical principles of patient autonomy and the right to self-determination, as enshrined in the ethical codes governing physicians in France. The physician must clearly explain the purpose of the sampling, the potential risks and benefits, the voluntary nature of participation, and the right to withdraw at any time without prejudice to their medical care. This transparency and respect for the patient's decision-making capacity are paramount. An incorrect approach that involves collecting samples without explicit, documented consent from the patient represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This violates the principle of informed consent, undermining patient autonomy, and potentially leading to a breach of confidentiality if the samples are used without authorization. Such an action could be construed as a violation of the physician's duty of care and professional integrity, potentially leading to disciplinary action by the Conseil national de l'Ordre des Médecins. Another incorrect approach, such as obtaining consent from a family member without the patient's capacity to consent and without a clear legal framework for such delegation, also fails to uphold the patient's rights and could be ethically problematic, especially if the patient's wishes are known or could have been ascertained. Furthermore, using samples for research purposes that were collected solely for diagnostic or therapeutic reasons, without a separate, explicit consent for research, constitutes a misuse of patient material and a breach of trust. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the ethical guidelines and legal requirements pertaining to patient consent and the use of biological samples for research. Physicians should always err on the side of caution, ensuring that all steps taken are transparent, voluntary, and fully documented. When in doubt, seeking guidance from ethics committees or professional bodies like the Conseil national de l'Ordre des Médecins is crucial. The decision-making framework should prioritize patient well-being and autonomy above all else, ensuring that any research activity is conducted with the utmost respect for the individual. Question 10. Governance review demonstrates that the Conseil national de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, is exploring the integration of enhanced computer-based assessment, CBA tools for physician evaluation. Considering the CNOM regulatory framework and ethical guidelines, which of the following best defines the primary purpose of these CBAs within the context of medical practice and physician oversight? Option A. To streamline the administrative process of physician licensing and reduce the overall time required for new physicians to enter the workforce, thereby increasing the availability of medical services. Option B. To assess a physician's adherence to administrative protocols and billing procedures, ensuring compliance with healthcare system regulations and financial reporting requirements. Option C. To provide a platform for continuous professional development by offering personalized learning modules and tracking a physician's engagement with educational content. Option D. To serve as a comprehensive and objective mechanism for evaluating a physician's knowledge, skills, and judgment against established professional competencies, thereby ensuring their fitness to practice and safeguarding public health. Correct answer is D. To serve as a comprehensive and objective mechanism for evaluating a physician's knowledge, skills, and judgment against established professional competencies, thereby ensuring their fitness to practice and safeguarding public health. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for efficient and standardized assessment of medical professionals and the ethical imperative to ensure fairness, accuracy, and the protection of patient safety. The Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins (CNOM) framework emphasizes the physician's responsibility to maintain competence and uphold public trust. Computer-based assessments (CBA) are a tool to achieve these goals, but their implementation requires careful consideration of their definition and purpose within the CNOM regulatory purview. The correct approach recognizes that CBAs, as defined and utilized under CNOM guidelines, are primarily intended to objectively evaluate a physician's knowledge, skills, and judgment against established professional standards. Their purpose is to ensure that physicians possess the necessary competencies to practice safely and effectively, thereby safeguarding public health. This aligns with the CNOM mandate to regulate the medical profession and protect the public interest. A CBA's design and application must therefore be transparent, validated, and focused on assessing core competencies relevant to medical practice, as outlined in relevant CNOM decrees and ethical codes. An incorrect approach would be to view CBAs as merely a cost-saving measure or a means to expedite the licensing process, without regard for their primary purpose of competency assessment. This fails to acknowledge the CNOM responsibility to ensure that all physicians meet rigorous standards. Another incorrect approach would be to implement CBAs without proper validation, or to use them for purposes beyond competency evaluation, such as assessing personality traits or non-medical skills, which falls outside the CNOM jurisdiction and the intended scope of medical assessment. Such actions could lead to unfair evaluation, undermine the credibility of the assessment process, and potentially compromise patient care by allowing unqualified individuals to practice. Professionals tasked with developing or overseeing CBAs must adopt a decision-making process rooted in the CNOM regulatory framework. This involves clearly defining the assessment objectives, ensuring the assessment content is directly relevant to medical practice and professional standards, employing validated psychometric principles in test design and scoring, and maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of the assessment process. The ultimate goal is to ensure that CBAs serve as a reliable tool for upholding the quality and ethical standards of the medical profession in France. Question 11. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing item response theory, (ERT), for the National Medical Licensing Examination could offer significant advantages in terms of measurement precision and test security. However, the CNOM must consider the implications for candidates and the overall integrity of the licensing process. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the CNOM regulatory framework and ethical obligations? Option A. A phased implementation of IRT, beginning with pilot studies on a subset of questions, followed by rigorous validation of the IRT model's psychometric properties and clear communication to candidates about the changes. Option B. Limited use of IRT for specific, less critical sections of the examination, while retaining the traditional model for core competencies. Option C. Immediate and full adoption of IRT across all examination components to leverage its benefits as quickly as possible, with post-implementation reviews. Option D. Rejection of IRT due to its perceived complexity and potential for candidate confusion, opting to maintain the current examination format. Correct answer is A. A phased implementation of IRT, beginning with pilot studies on a subset of questions, followed by rigorous validation of the IRT model's psychometric properties and clear communication to candidates about the changes. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins (CNOM), as it grapples with the implementation of item response theory (ERT) in medical licensing examinations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the theoretical advantages of IRT, such as enhanced measurement precision and adaptive testing, with the practical and ethical considerations of ensuring fairness, transparency, and public trust in the medical profession. The CNOM must navigate the potential for IRT to be perceived as overly complex or opaque by candidates and the public, while also upholding its mandate to ensure that only competent physicians are licensed. The correct approach, which involves a phased implementation with robust validation and clear communication, represents best professional practice because it aligns with the CNOM fundamental responsibilities. Article R. 4124-1 of the Code de la Santé Publique, which outlines the CNOM role in ensuring the quality of medical practice, implicitly supports the adoption of scientifically sound assessment methods. By prioritizing validation studies, pilot testing, and transparent communication about the IRT model's principles and benefits, the CNOM demonstrates a commitment to evidence-based decision-making and professional accountability. This approach ensures that any new assessment methodology is rigorously tested for its psychometric properties and its impact on candidate fairness before widespread adoption, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the licensing process. An incorrect approach would be to immediately adopt IRT without sufficient validation. This would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such an action would violate the principle of due process for candidates, as they would be subjected to an untested and potentially flawed assessment system. It would also undermine public confidence in the CNOM ability to conduct fair and reliable examinations, potentially leading to challenges to the validity of licenses issued. Furthermore, a hasty adoption without proper validation could contravene the CNOM duty to ensure that examinations accurately reflect the competencies required for safe medical practice, as outlined in its general mission to protect public health. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss IRT entirely due to its perceived complexity, without a thorough investigation of its potential benefits. This would be a failure of professional diligence and a missed opportunity to improve the efficiency and accuracy of the licensing process. The CNOM has a responsibility to explore and adopt advancements in assessment methodology that can enhance the quality of its evaluation, provided they meet rigorous standards of validity and fairness. Sticking to outdated methods solely due to resistance to change would not serve the best interests of the profession or the public. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of new methodologies. This includes 1. Understanding the theoretical underpinnings and potential benefits of the proposed method. 2. Conducting thorough research and consulting with experts in psychometrics and medical education. 3. Performing pilot studies and validation analyses to assess the method's effectiveness and fairness in the specific context of medical licensing. 4. Developing clear communication strategies to explain the methodology and its rationale to stakeholders. And 5. Implementing the method in a phased manner, with ongoing monitoring and evaluation. This structured approach ensures that decisions are evidence-based, ethically sound, and aligned with the CNOM mission. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess a physician's understanding of professional obligations when faced with a patient requesting a prescription for a medication that the physician believes is not medically indicated, but for which the patient insists. Which assessment item best evaluates the physician's ability to apply the Conseil national de l'Ordre des Médecins (CNOM) framework in this situation? Option A. A scenario-based question requiring the physician to explain their reasoning for either prescribing or refusing the medication, referencing specific CNOM articles related to patient well-being, professional autonomy, and the duty to inform. Option B. An open-ended question asking the physician to describe their general approach to patient requests for medication. Option C. A multiple-choice question listing potential patient motivations for requesting medication and asking the physician to select the most common one. Option D. A true/false question asking if a physician is obligated to prescribe any medication a patient requests. The correct answer is A. A scenario-based question requiring the physician to explain their reasoning for either prescribing or refusing the medication, referencing specific CNOM articles related to patient well-being, professional autonomy, and the duty to inform. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical need to assess a physician's understanding of professional conduct and ethical obligations, as defined by the Conseil national de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM. Constructing assessment items that accurately measure this understanding requires careful consideration of the CNOM regulatory framework. A scenario that presents a physician with a common ethical dilemma, requiring them to apply CNOM principles to a practical situation, is professionally challenging because it moves beyond rote memorization to assess judgment and ethical reasoning. The physician must navigate potential conflicts of interest, patient confidentiality, and professional responsibility, all within the specific legal and ethical boundaries set by the CNOM. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly tests the physician's ability to apply the CNOM-specific articles and ethical guidelines to a real-world situation. This aligns with the CNOM mandate to ensure physicians uphold professional standards and act in the best interest of patients while respecting the integrity of the medical profession. A well-constructed question in this vein, requiring a reasoned explanation, demonstrates a deeper level of comprehension than a simple factual recall question. It encourages the physician to articulate their understanding of the underlying principles and their application, which is crucial for ethical decision-making. An incorrect approach would be to present a question that is overly simplistic, focusing only on factual recall of specific CNOM articles without requiring application. This fails to assess the physician's judgment and ability to navigate complex ethical scenarios. Another incorrect approach would be to pose a question that is ambiguous or open to subjective interpretation without clear grounding in CNOM regulations, leading to inconsistent or unfair assessments. Furthermore, an incorrect approach might involve a question that requires knowledge outside the CNOM purview, thereby exceeding the scope of the assessment and the physician's professional obligations as defined by the Order. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes clarity, relevance, and the accurate assessment of applied knowledge. This involves 1. Identifying the core competency or ethical principle to be assessed, directly linked to CNOM regulations. 2. Designing a scenario that presents a realistic professional challenge. 3. Crafting assessment items that require the physician to demonstrate their understanding and application of relevant CNOM rules and ethical codes. 4. Ensuring the assessment criteria are objective and directly measurable against the established regulatory framework. Question 13. Operational review demonstrates that the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, is considering a transition to a fully computer-based assessment system for ongoing professional competency evaluation. While this promises increased efficiency and standardized scoring, concerns have been raised regarding potential digital exclusion among some physicians and the security of sensitive personal data. Which of the following approaches best navigates these ethical and practical challenges while adhering to CNOM regulatory framework? Option A. Implement a phased transition to computer-based assessments, offering comprehensive training and technical support, alongside a parallel equivalent paper-based assessment option for a defined period, and establishing robust data encryption and privacy protocols. Option B. Proceed with the computer-based assessment system as the sole evaluation method, assuming that all physicians will adapt quickly and focus solely on the technical aspects of the assessment platform, deferring data security concerns to a later review. Option C. Introduce the computer-based assessment system with a limited pilot program for a small, tech-savvy group of physicians, without providing alternative assessment methods or explicit support for those who may struggle with the technology, and postpone comprehensive data security reviews. Option D. Mandate immediate adoption of the computer-based assessment system for all physicians, with a disclaimer that access to technology is a personal responsibility, and rely on existing general data protection guidelines without specific enhancements for this new system. Correct answer is A. Implement a phased transition to computer-based assessments, offering comprehensive training and technical support, alongside a parallel, equivalent paper-based assessment option for a defined period, and establishing robust data encryption and privacy protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning the implementation of a new computer-based assessment system for medical professionals, as mandated by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM. The challenge lies in balancing the potential advantages of efficiency and standardization offered by technology with the inherent risks of digital exclusion, data security, and the potential for bias within the assessment itself. A physician's professional duty, as outlined by CNOM regulations, includes maintaining competence, ensuring patient safety, and upholding the integrity of the medical profession. This necessitates a careful consideration of how new assessment methods impact these core principles. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive, phased implementation that includes robust safeguards and support mechanisms. This aligns with the CNOM commitment to continuous professional development and the ethical obligation to ensure that all physicians, regardless of their technological proficiency or access, can participate fairly in assessments. By offering multiple assessment modalities, providing adequate training, and establishing clear protocols for data protection and appeals, This approach upholds the principles of equity, accessibility, and due process. It acknowledges that while computer-based assessments offer benefits, they must not create barriers to professional practice or compromise the quality of medical care. An incorrect approach would be to adopt a purely computer-based assessment without considering the diverse needs and circumstances of all physicians. This could lead to regulatory and ethical failures. For instance, failing to provide alternative assessment methods for physicians with limited digital literacy or access would violate the principle of equitable opportunity, potentially leading to unjustified exclusion from professional practice. Similarly, neglecting to implement stringent data security measures would contravene the CNOM directives on professional confidentiality and the protection of sensitive information, risking breaches that could harm both physicians and patients. Furthermore, a system that does not allow for appeals or address potential algorithmic bias would undermine the fairness and transparency expected of any professional evaluation, potentially leading to arbitrary or discriminatory outcomes. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a thorough risk-benefit analysis, consultation with stakeholders, including physicians from diverse backgrounds, and adherence to established ethical guidelines and CNOM regulations. It requires a proactive approach to identifying and mitigating potential disadvantages, ensuring that technological advancements serve to enhance, rather than hinder, the pursuit of professional excellence and patient well-being. Question 14. The audit findings indicate that a recent quality improvement initiative aimed at assessing patient satisfaction with post-operative care relied on a sample of patient records. The sampling method used involved selecting records from patients who had provided positive feedback in previous surveys, with the intention of understanding what contributed to their positive experiences. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, for sampling personal characteristics in such a quality improvement context? Option A. Randomly selecting records from a single, high-volume surgical department to ensure a sufficient number of cases for analysis, regardless of other patient characteristics. Option B. Stratified random sampling of patient records based on anonymized demographic categories relevant to post-operative care outcomes, ensuring a representative cross-section of the patient population. Option C. Sampling based on readily available patient contact information to facilitate follow-up interviews for richer qualitative data without explicit consent for this specific sampling purpose. Option D. Selecting records exclusively from patients who have previously expressed high satisfaction, to identify best practices from those most likely to have received excellent care. The correct answer is B. Stratified random sampling of patient records based on anonymized demographic categories relevant to post-operative care outcomes, ensuring a representative cross-section of the patient population. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential issue with how patient demographic data was sampled for a quality improvement initiative. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the need for robust data to drive meaningful improvements against the fundamental ethical and legal obligations to protect patient privacy and ensure equitable representation. The Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, regulations, particularly those concerning professional conduct and data handling, are paramount here. The correct approach involves a method that ensures both the representativeness of the sample for the quality initiative and the strict adherence to data privacy principles. This means employing a sampling strategy that is scientifically sound for the purpose of the quality improvement, while simultaneously anonymizing or pseudonymizing patient data to prevent identification. The CNOM emphasizes the physician's duty of confidentiality and the responsible use of patient information. A method that achieves this balance, such as stratified random sampling based on anonymized demographic categories, e.g., age groups, general geographic regions without specific identifiers, for the purpose of analysis, aligns with these principles. It allows for the assessment of potential disparities in care or outcomes across different patient groups without compromising individual privacy. An incorrect approach would be to sample based on easily identifiable personal characteristics without adequate anonymization or consent, or to use a sampling method that inherently biases the results due to a lack of consideration for patient diversity. For instance, sampling only from patients who have recently visited a specific clinic without considering other factors could lead to a skewed understanding of broader patient populations. Another failure would be to sample based on sensitive personal characteristics that are not directly relevant to the quality improvement objective, or to do so in a way that could inadvertently lead to stigmatization or discrimination, violating the CNOM principles of professional integrity and respect for individuals. The CNOM mandates that any use of patient data must be for legitimate professional purposes and conducted with the utmost care to avoid harm or breach of trust. The professional decision-making process should involve a thorough understanding of the quality improvement objective, the ethical and legal constraints on data usage, and the principles of sound statistical sampling. When faced with such a situation, a physician should consult relevant CNOM guidelines on data management and patient privacy, and if necessary, seek advice from the order itself or a data protection expert. The priority is always to uphold patient confidentiality and dignity while striving for the highest standards of medical practice. Question 15. The audit findings indicate that certain diagnostic protocols used by physicians within the Ordre des Médecins are not consistently applied, leading to variations in patient assessments. To address this, which of the following strategies would best ensure the dependability and objectivity of these diagnostic protocols and the physician's application of them? Option A. Encouraging physicians to rely on their extensive clinical experience and intuition, as this is often the most efficient way to reach a diagnosis, and assuming that individual expertise inherently guarantees consistent application of protocols. Option B. Conducting periodic surveys among patients to gauge their satisfaction with the diagnostic process, believing that patient perception is the primary indicator of protocol effectiveness and reliability. Option C. Implementing a system to regularly reevaluate the same patients using the same diagnostic protocols by the same physicians to check for consistency over time, and having multiple physicians independently assess the same patient cases to ensure agreement in their findings, alongside verifying that the different components of the protocols measure the same underlying diagnostic concept. Option D. Focusing solely on the speed of diagnosis, with the rationale that quicker assessments lead to faster patient treatment, and considering reliability measures as secondary to efficiency. The correct answer is C. Implementing a system to regularly reevaluate the same patients using the same diagnostic protocols by the same physicians to check for consistency over time, and having multiple physicians independently assess the same patient cases to ensure agreement in their findings, alongside verifying that the different components of the protocols measure the same underlying diagnostic concept. Explanation. The audit findings highlight a critical challenge in ensuring the consistency and accuracy of medical assessments performed by physicians within the Ordre des Médecins framework. The scenario is professionally challenging because the reliability of diagnostic tools and physician evaluations directly impacts patient care, treatment decisions, and the overall integrity of medical practice. Maintaining high standards of reliability is paramount to upholding public trust and adhering to the ethical obligations of physicians. The correct approach, focusing on establishing robust reliability measures for assessment tools and physician evaluations, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the core principles of the Conseil national de l'Ordre des Médecins, which emphasizes the physician's duty to provide competent and evidence-based care. Specifically, employing test-retest reliability ensures that a physician's assessment remains stable over time when applied to the same patient under similar conditions, preventing arbitrary changes in diagnosis or prognosis. Inter-rater reliability is crucial for ensuring that different physicians, when evaluating the same patient or case, arrive at similar conclusions, thereby promoting objectivity and reducing subjective bias. Internal consistency, particularly relevant for multi-item assessment tools or diagnostic criteria, verifies that the different components of an assessment measure the same underlying construct, leading to more coherent and dependable evaluations. Adherence to these reliability principles is implicitly mandated by the Ordre's commitment to professional excellence and patient safety. An incorrect approach would be to disregard the need for systematic reliability assessment, perhaps by relying solely on anecdotal evidence of consistency, or assuming that individual physician experience negates the need for objective validation. This would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. The Ordre des Médecins expects physicians to engage in continuous quality improvement and to utilize validated methods. Ignoring test-retest reliability could lead to inconsistent patient management based on the timing of assessments, potentially causing harm. Neglecting inter-rater reliability could result in disparate treatment plans for similar patient conditions, depending on which physician is consulted, undermining the principle of equitable care. A failure to consider internal consistency in assessment tools could lead to flawed diagnostic conclusions due to the tool's inherent incoherence, violating the physician's duty of care, and potentially leading to misdiagnosis or inappropriate treatment. Such an approach would fall short of the professional standards expected by the Order, which implicitly requires the use of reliable and valid methods in medical practice. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive approach to quality assurance. Physicians should be aware of the different types of reliability and their relevance to their practice. When developing or adopting assessment tools, or when participating in multi-physician evaluations, they should actively seek or implement measures to assess and ensure test-retest, inter-rater, and internal consistency reliability. This involves understanding the principles behind these measures and, where applicable, collaborating with colleagues or seeking expert advice to validate their assessment processes. The ultimate goal is to ensure that patient care is based on the most accurate, consistent, and objective evaluations possible, thereby upholding the ethical and professional standards of the Ordre des Médecins. Question 16. Strategic planning requires the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins to carefully consider the integration of new computer-based assessment technologies, which approach best aligns with the CNOM mandate to ensure physician competence and ethical practice while leveraging technological advancements. Option A. Prioritizing technologies that offer the most advanced features and cost savings, with a plan for post-implementation review of their effectiveness. Option B. Relying primarily on vendor demonstrations and testimonials to gauge the suitability and security of new computer-based assessment tools. Option C. Conducting a comprehensive, evidence-based evaluation of proposed technologies, including pilot testing, validation of reliability and validity, and rigorous assessment of data security and privacy protocols, ensuring alignment with CNOM ethical guidelines. Option D. Implementing the most widely adopted technologies in other professional bodies, assuming their suitability for medical assessment without specific validation. The correct answer is A. Prioritizing technologies that offer the most advanced features and cost savings, with a plan for post-implementation review of their effectiveness. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a challenge for the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM, in evaluating the adoption of new computer-based assessment technologies for medical professionals. The core difficulty lies in balancing the potential benefits of these technologies, efficiency, objectivity, broader reach, with the paramount importance of ensuring the continued competence and ethical practice of physicians, as mandated by the CNOM regulatory framework. The CNOM must ensure that any technological advancement does not compromise the integrity of assessments, patient safety, or the professional standards expected of its members. This requires a nuanced understanding of how these technologies function, their potential biases, data security implications, and their alignment with the CNOM mission. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, evidence-based evaluation of the proposed technologies against established CNOM guidelines and ethical principles. This includes rigorous pilot testing to assess reliability, validity, and fairness, alongside a thorough review of data privacy and security protocols. The CNOM must ensure that the chosen technologies are transparent, auditable, and do not introduce discriminatory biases. Furthermore, the evaluation must consider the practical implementation challenges for physicians and the potential impact on the assessment process's overall fairness and accuracy. This aligns with the CNOM responsibility to uphold the highest standards of medical practice and to protect the public interest by ensuring that physicians are assessed competently and ethically. Incorrect approaches analysis. Adopting technologies solely based on their perceived modernity or cost-effectiveness without rigorous validation would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This overlooks the CNOM duty to ensure the quality and integrity of medical assessments. Relying on vendor assurances without independent verification of security and data protection measures violates data privacy regulations and the trust placed in the CNOM to safeguard sensitive information. Implementing assessments without clear protocols for addressing technical glitches or potential biases would undermine the fairness and reliability of the evaluation process, potentially leading to unjust outcomes for physicians and compromising patient safety. Prioritizing speed of implementation over thoroughness risks introducing flawed assessment methods that do not accurately reflect a physician's competence. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with evaluating new assessment technologies must adopt a systematic and critical approach. This involves 1. Defining clear objectives for the assessment and how the technology will meet them. 2. Conducting thorough due diligence on the technology's technical specifications, validation studies, and potential biases. 3. Prioritizing data security and privacy in compliance with relevant regulations. 4. Engaging in pilot testing and seeking feedback from stakeholders. 5. Ensuring transparency and fairness in the assessment process. 6. Establishing clear protocols for addressing issues and continuous improvement. This structured decision-making process ensures that technological adoption serves the CNOM mission of maintaining high standards of medical practice and protecting public health. Question 17. The efficiency study reveals that the current assessment design for continuing professional development within the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins (CNOM) framework is perceived by a significant portion of physicians as overly focused on rote memorization of pharmacological dosages and less on the nuanced application of diagnostic reasoning in complex patient cases. Considering the CNOM mandate to ensure the highest standards of medical practice and public health protection, which of the following assessment design principles best aligns with these objectives and the ethical considerations for medical professionals? Option A. Prioritize assessment methods that simulate real-world clinical scenarios, requiring physicians to integrate knowledge, make diagnostic decisions, and propose management plans, thereby evaluating applied competence. Option B. Develop assessments based on historical medical texts and practices that are no longer current, to gauge a physician's understanding of foundational medical principles. Option C. Introduce time-limited assessments that reward rapid identification of common conditions, with minimal emphasis on differential diagnosis or patient-specific factors. Option D. Increase the frequency of assessments that exclusively test recall of specific diagnostic criteria and treatment guidelines from memory, to ensure comprehensive knowledge retention. The correct answer is A. Prioritize assessment methods that simulate real-world clinical scenarios, requiring physicians to integrate knowledge, make diagnostic decisions, and propose management plans, thereby evaluating applied competence. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in designing assessments for medical professionals under the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins (CNOM) framework. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for rigorous evaluation of competence with the ethical imperative to ensure assessments are fair, relevant, and do not unduly burden practitioners. The CNOM regulatory framework emphasizes the physician's duty to maintain and update their knowledge and skills, and assessments are a key mechanism for this. However, the design must also consider the practical realities of medical practice and avoid creating barriers to continued professional development. The correct approach prioritizes assessment methods that directly reflect the complexities of clinical decision-making and patient care, aligning with the CNOM mandate for ensuring high standards of medical practice. This involves using case-based scenarios, simulations, or peer review of clinical practice, which are recognized as valid measures of applied knowledge and skills. Such methods are ethically sound because they are directly relevant to the physician's daily work, thus promoting genuine professional improvement rather than mere theoretical recall. This aligns with the CNOM overarching goal of protecting public health by ensuring competent medical professionals. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on theoretical knowledge recall, such as multiple-choice questions, testing abstract medical facts without clinical context, fails to adequately assess practical competence. This is ethically problematic as it may not identify physicians who struggle with applying knowledge in real-world patient scenarios, potentially impacting patient safety. It also risks creating an assessment that is perceived as irrelevant by practitioners, undermining engagement and the perceived value of continuing professional development mandated by the CNOM. Another incorrect approach that emphasizes speed of response over accuracy or depth of reasoning would be ethically flawed. The CNOM regulations implicitly require thoroughness and diligence in medical practice. An assessment that rewards haste over considered judgment would contradict this fundamental principle, potentially encouraging superficial engagement with complex medical issues. This could lead to a decline in the quality of care provided, directly contravening the CNOM mission. A further incorrect approach that relies on outdated or unvalidated assessment methodologies would also be professionally unacceptable. The CNOM expects its members to adhere to current best practices, which extends to the methods used for evaluating their own competence. Using outdated assessments risks not accurately reflecting current medical knowledge or practice standards, thus failing to identify areas for improvement and potentially allowing substandard practice to persist. A professional decision-making process for designing such assessments should involve a multidisciplinary team including experienced clinicians, assessment specialists, and representatives of the CNOM. This team should consider the specific competencies being assessed, the target audience, and the available resources. The process should be iterative, with pilot testing and feedback incorporated to ensure validity, reliability, fairness, and relevance to actual medical practice, all within the ethical and regulatory guidelines set forth by the CNOM. Question 18. Process analysis reveals that a new assessment tool has been developed to evaluate physician competency for continuing professional development within the framework of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins. A physician is tasked with recommending whether this tool should be adopted. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of reliability and validity in professional assessments as expected by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins? Option A. Reject the tool without further investigation, citing concerns about its novelty and the potential for disruption to existing assessment procedures. Option B. Accept the tool based on positive testimonials from a few prominent physicians who have used it in pilot programs. Assuming its effectiveness, Option C. Thoroughly review peer-reviewed studies and psychometric data demonstrating the tool's consistency and accuracy in measuring intended competencies, and assess its alignment with the specific ethical and professional standards of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins. Option D. Implement the tool immediately for all physicians undergoing continuing professional development, prioritizing its potential for streamlining the assessment process. The correct answer is C. Thoroughly review peer-reviewed studies and psychometric data demonstrating the tool's consistency and accuracy in measuring intended competencies, and assess its alignment with the specific ethical and professional standards of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a physician to evaluate the reliability and validity of a new assessment tool intended for use within the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins framework. The physician must balance the potential benefits of a more accurate assessment with the risks of adopting an unproven or flawed instrument, which could lead to misjudgments about a colleague's competence or suitability for practice. The ethical imperative to uphold professional standards and protect public safety is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based evaluation of the assessment tool's psychometric properties. This means scrutinizing the methodology used to establish its reliability, consistency of results, and validity accuracy in measuring what it purports to measure. The physician should seek peer-reviewed studies, consult with experts in psychometrics, and consider the tool's alignment with the specific competencies and ethical standards mandated by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins. This rigorous approach ensures that any decisions made based on the assessment are fair, objective, and grounded in sound scientific principles, thereby upholding the integrity of the medical profession and patient care. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that relies solely on anecdotal evidence or the endorsement of a single influential figure, without independent verification of the assessment's reliability and validity, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the standards of objective evaluation required by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins and risks introducing bias into professional judgments. It disregards the fundamental need for empirical evidence to support the use of any assessment tool. Another incorrect approach would be to adopt the assessment tool immediately based on its perceived novelty or potential for efficiency, without undertaking a comprehensive review of its psychometric properties. This haste overlooks the potential for the tool to be unreliable or invalid, leading to erroneous conclusions about a physician's capabilities. Such an action would contravene the ethical duty to ensure that assessments are fair and accurate, potentially harming the assessed physician and the public. Finally, an approach that dismisses the assessment tool outright due to its unfamiliarity or complexity, without giving it due consideration and a proper evaluation of its merits, is also professionally unsound. This can stifle innovation and prevent the adoption of potentially valuable tools that could enhance the assessment process. The Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins expects a balanced and evidence-based approach, not one based on prejudice or resistance to change. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, evidence-based decision-making process. This involves clearly defining the purpose of the assessment, identifying relevant professional standards, as set by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, researching available assessment tools, critically evaluating their reliability and validity through scientific literature and expert consultation, and then making an informed decision based on the evidence. This process ensures objectivity, fairness, and adherence to ethical and regulatory requirements. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows that a physician is considering adopting a new cloud-based electronic health record (EHR) system to enhance patient record management and accessibility. Which of the following actions best demonstrates a responsible and compliant approach to data privacy and security considerations under the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins (CNOM) framework? Option A. Implementing the cloud EHR system, and then addressing any identified data security concerns on an ad hoc basis as they arise, without a pre-implementation risk assessment. Option B. Prioritizing the cloud EHR system with the lowest subscription cost and the most user-friendly interface, assuming the provider's standard security measures are adequate for medical data. Option C. Conducting a thorough risk assessment of the cloud EHR system, including an evaluation of the provider's security protocols, data encryption methods, access controls, and compliance with relevant French and European data protection regulations, before implementation. Option D. Proceeding with the implementation of the cloud EHR system immediately, relying on the physician's general understanding of data security principles, without specific verification of the provider's practices. Correct answer is C. Conducting a thorough risk assessment of the cloud EHR system, including an evaluation of the provider's security protocols, data encryption methods, access controls, and compliance with relevant French and European data protection regulations, before implementation. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a physician is considering implementing a new cloud-based electronic health record (EHR) system. This scenario is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between leveraging technological advancements for improved patient care and the paramount obligation to safeguard sensitive patient data, as mandated by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins (CNOM) regulations. The physician must navigate complex data privacy and security considerations, ensuring compliance with professional ethics and legal frameworks governing medical practice in France. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes patient data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This approach aligns with the CNOM ethical guidelines and any specific decrees or circulars pertaining to the use of digital tools in healthcare. A thorough risk assessment would identify potential vulnerabilities in the cloud system, evaluate the likelihood and impact of data breaches, and establish robust security measures, including encryption, access controls, and regular audits. It also necessitates understanding the data processing agreements with the cloud provider, ensuring they meet French and European data protection standards, e.g., GDPR, as it applies to healthcare data. This proactive and systematic evaluation ensures that the chosen system and its implementation adhere to the highest standards of patient data protection, thereby upholding professional responsibility and trust. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the cost-effectiveness or perceived ease of use of the cloud EHR system, without a rigorous data security evaluation. This overlooks the CNOM explicit or implicit requirements for maintaining patient confidentiality, which is a cornerstone of medical ethics. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that the cloud provider's standard security measures are sufficient without independent verification or a clear understanding of how patient data will be handled and protected. This demonstrates a failure to exercise due diligence and a potential violation of the physician's duty of care regarding data security. Furthermore, proceeding with implementation without a clear data governance policy, including protocols for data access, retention, and deletion, would be a significant ethical and regulatory lapse, exposing patient data to undue risk and potentially violating professional obligations. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with identifying all applicable CNOM regulations and relevant data protection laws. This should be followed by a detailed assessment of the proposed technology security features and the provider's data handling practices. The process must include a formal risk assessment, the development of mitigation strategies, and the establishment of clear data governance policies. Finally, ongoing monitoring and periodic reevaluation of security measures are crucial to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory landscapes. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that a significant portion of the electronic health record data for a patient cohort exhibits inconsistencies in diagnostic coding, patient identifiers, and medication dosages. To prepare this data for a retrospective analysis aimed at evaluating treatment efficacy, what is the most appropriate and regulatorily compliant process for data cleaning and preparation? Adhering strictly to the framework of the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM. Option A. Manually adjust all identified inconsistencies based on the clinician's best guess or anecdotal evidence from similar cases, prioritizing speed of data preparation over absolute accuracy. Option B. Implement a multi-stage validation process that involves cross-referencing patient identifiers with official registries, standardizing diagnostic codes using approved medical terminologies, and verifying medication dosages against prescribing guidelines and patient medication histories, with all corrections meticulously documented. Option C. Utilize advanced data imputation algorithms to automatically fill in all missing or inconsistent data points, assuming the algorithms can infer the most probable correct values based on the overall dataset. Option D. Immediately purge all records containing any identified discrepancies to ensure the integrity of the remaining dataset, as any data with errors is inherently unreliable for analysis. The correct answer is B. Implement a multi-stage validation process that involves cross-referencing patient identifiers with official registries, standardizing diagnostic codes using approved medical terminologies, and verifying medication dosages against prescribing guidelines and patient medication histories, with all corrections meticulously documented. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical data management, where the integrity and usability of patient information are compromised by inconsistencies. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient data processing with the absolute imperative of patient confidentiality and data accuracy, as mandated by the Conseil National de l'Ordre des Médecins, CNOM. Failure to address these issues rigorously can lead to flawed clinical decision-making, compromised patient care, and potential regulatory sanctions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, multi-stage process that prioritizes data validation against established medical coding standards and patient identification protocols. This aligns with CNOM guidelines emphasizing the physician's responsibility for the accuracy and security of patient records. By cross-referencing data with official patient registries and applying standardized medical terminology, the physician ensures that the clean data is not only consistent, but also clinically meaningful and compliant with legal and ethical requirements for medical documentation. This meticulous validation process minimizes the risk of introducing new errors and upholds the principle of data integrity essential for patient safety and professional accountability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the immediate deletion of all records exhibiting discrepancies without further investigation. This is ethically and regulatorily problematic, as it constitutes data destruction without due process and could lead to the loss of vital patient information, potentially impacting ongoing care or future medical history. CNOM regulations require diligent record keeping, not arbitrary deletion. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on automated software to correct all identified anomalies without human oversight. While automation can be a tool, it lacks the nuanced clinical judgment required to interpret complex medical data. Incorrect automated corrections can lead to misdiagnosis or inappropriate treatment, violating the physician's duty of care and CNOM emphasis on professional responsibility for patient data. A third incorrect approach is to manually impute missing data points based on assumptions or incomplete information without a clear, documented rationale or validation. This introduces a high risk of introducing bias or inaccuracies into the dataset, undermining the reliability of any subsequent analysis, and potentially contravening CNOM strictures on maintaining accurate and verifiable patient records. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such data integrity issues should adopt a structured approach. First, understand the scope and nature of the discrepancies. Second, consult relevant CNOM guidelines and ethical codes regarding data management and patient confidentiality. Third, develop a clear protocol for data cleaning that includes validation steps against authoritative sources and, where necessary, expert clinical review. Fourth, document all cleaning and imputation decisions meticulously. Finally, implement ongoing data quality checks to prevent future issues. This systematic process ensures that data cleaning is performed responsibly, ethically, and in full compliance with regulatory requirements.